Hello everyone and welcome back to another Strategoy video. This is an exciting week going into all the rules that are going to be coming out this week, but I wanted to squeeze in one last third edition video before we move officially on to fourth edition because I've been keeping track of records of all of my games over the past 3 years, and I feel like there's some interesting insights there, but also it gives everyone a bit of a kind of insider's look into what it means for me, at least, to be or to try to be a competitive player. And you know, maybe we're just Jonas and I are just two people speaking into the void basically on this channel, but I'd like to think that we have put in our time in our own ways to being an authority on the game is hard to say, but at least being someone who has enough experience to maybe have some thoughts that are worth listening to. In addition, seeing as Jonas just did our 3K subscribers video where he broke down his amazingly painted Lumineth army, which I certainly cannot show you guys a similar thing with my armies. I'm not a great painter, and I paint very quickly to get things on the board. I like choosing my color schemes, but that's about as good as it gets. So in a certain sense, this is kind of me showing a little bit of my niche of the hobby, where I keep track of all my games and where I'm busy playing as often as possible. So in a kind of certain sense, this is my celebration of 3K, but obviously it's something I wanted to do anyway because we're done with an edition, and it's kind of cool to look back at everything. That to that point, I actually spent many hours auditing all of the data I've been keeping over the past 3 years with regards to my games to make sure it was right, but also so that I can take a snapshot before I move on to fourth and start merging it with fourth. So I'll keep my data separate and merge them as well. But anyway, let's get into it, guys. So here we go with the summary video with a nice little warp lightning cannon there. We're going to start with an overview of what I've been doing in the seasons, or in third edition, and then we'll move on to the seasons. Oh, I got seasons here, eras, and then moving on to the tournaments that I was involved with. Okay, so overview of third edition. I personally played 376 games in the 3-year time span. That doesn't mean I actually didn't play a single second edition game, but I was a big fan I started collecting halfway through second edition right after COVID hit, but I just couldn't get any games in. So I was a sort of theory crafting, well-versed second edition player, but functionally I've only played third edition. So that's 376 games, which works out to roughly 11 a month or 2.5 a week. There are definitely people who play more often than me. I believe Math Mallow plays something like almost a game a day. There's some Worlds players that play that often, but I still think I'm probably in the upper percentages somewhere, depending on who you're comparing to. I also played at 41 tournaments. We'll get into more of that later. That was a total of 155 of my games. Not quite half. And then I've got a short list just to shout out some of my friends here. My most played against friends. You might think, well, I play all these games, but that means I probably am playing against these little pocket metas of just my best friends. And this is the most true with these 5 people. But as soon as we get to the last 2, which would be Jonas and Hank, we're already starting to talk about people that I don't get to see as much as I'd like. And then if I had printed a graph of this, I didn't want to put everyone's name on screen, but if I had printed a graph of this, you would see that the vast majority of people I've only played against once or twice because of tournament play and or just being hard to set up schedules. But anyway, Nick and I have played 30 times and never at a tournament, which I'm still waiting for. That said, Nick tends to perform a bit better than I do at tournaments, which means we kind of stop being in each other's meta. But he largely plays Ironjawz, Gitz, OBR, and Feck, or at least during that time. Mathieu, we've almost played as many as Nick, 28 times. He's doesn't go to as many tournaments as we do, but he is, I would say, a competitive player and plays Soulblight, Seraphon, Nurgle, and Feck. Feck is relatively new for him. And Nurgle too, I guess. Then my buddy Luke. Luke is definitely more of a board games kind of guy. He likes playing everything, a little bit of everything. So Luke and I get together a lot, but he doesn't really go to a lot of tournaments. He mainly plays Slaanesh and Idoneth. Jonas, everyone knows, despite the distance, I live in Amsterdam and he lives in Antwerp. Despite the distance, we've actually squeezed in a number of games. There's one time he came over and we played. He spent the night for an evening, and then over those 2 days we played 4 games. And then we played 2 games once at his place, and then had a tournament the next day. The only tournament I've gone to with Jonas. Yeah. And Jonas also likes to say that we met at a tournament. We met when I went to a tournament, but he invited me over to his house. The only tournament I've known Jonas to do during the time we've known each other was the one that we did together. That one, which was really awesome. Even though I had a feeling he was probably going to win that game, and he did. He won all 3 games in a row that time. But he also plays Sylvaneth, Seraphon, Soulblight, lots of S's, plus, of course, Lumineth. But I've never really gotten to play him playing those other armies. I think he played Ideneth one time against me here. He just borrowed my models when he came over. And then he was borrowing someone else's Nurgle army one time. But obviously loved playing against Jonas. I should give him credit for this too. We almost went to a doubles tournament together, but then he got sick right at the last minute. And then Tom Meches ended up filling in for him. And then my buddy Hank, who I speak of a little bit less often these days because unfortunately we haven't been able to get our schedules together with work stuff. But he's kind of tied right there with Jonas. He plays largely Ideneth and KO, but he's also played a little bit of Soulblight. I think he sold his Soulblight though. Okay, so moving on. I tried to color code this. Let's look at the graph on the right. So these are all of my games with regards to who I play against. So this is the distribution played versus Grand Alliances. Now, granted, I didn't correct for how big the Grand Alliances are. Obviously, Order has 9 armies. Chaos in 3rd edition had 7, unless you count Legion the First Prince. But for what it's worth, I lumped Legion the First Prince into Slaves of Darkness because I only played 3 games of them. And then Death only has 4 armies, and Destruction has 4 books. You could call it another 3 armies, 7 if you really want to break up the Auric War Clans. But you'll see here that I feel like that's maybe not very indicative of reality. So I tried to color code in the left graph there the number of games I've played versus certain factions. And you can see I have played almost double Soulblight as at times. I played against Soulblight almost twice as much as the next option, which is Slaves. And Soulblight, when you hear me complain about Varangard or you hear me complain about Soulblight, there's a reason why those 3 armies, I tend to have a really poor performance against those 3 armies, and they are also my most commonly played armies, which you'd think I would learn how to beat them, but it just, for whatever reason, the kind of armies I play, it doesn't really work out that way. Now, maybe on the other side of the spectrum, we've got the three of the 4 supposed factions that are in the Auric War Clans books. Bone Splitters I've only played against once. That was against my buddy Kai, who was playing a whole bunch of the Spear dudes when that was the thing. Big Wa supposedly was popular, but I only got to play against him twice. And Cruel Boys never really had their time in the sun, at least in a competitive meta worlds type level here in Europe. So only got to play against them 3 times. So we could have lumped those 6 games into the Iron Jaws, which I played 16 times. So if we had done that, that would have bumped them up to the 3rd most played against thing, just the Auric War Clans book. But obviously those separate armies feel a bit different. Otherwise, Suns and Fire Slayers Skaven are all sitting around 5 or 6. So not getting a whole lot of attention in the meta. Suns, especially once it got solved, really wasn't that popular. Fire Slayers had a moment in the sun, but it just was too slow, I felt, and you just didn't see it very often. And then Skaven didn't get popular until recently, really. And then Beasts of Chaos would be the next, and that's pretty self-explanatory, not only with them going away and having such an old model range, but they weren't that great until they got the Herdstone change, and then the 3rd edition book came out, and that made them really interesting. But even then, you didn't see them as often as you might think. Okay, so I split my performance against factions. The way I did this is I took my average that I have, my average win rate, and then I compared all of my... I split the two, like the factions into 2 different groups. One where I perform positively against my average, so that would be this one, and then the next slide will be those factions where I perform negatively compared to my average performance win rate. So you can see Big Wa is supposedly my best one, but I've only played against them twice and I won 100% of the games, so that's just really not fair. But Slaanesh is actually fair. I've played against Slaanesh, I think something like 17, 18 times, and it's my number one performance against any army. That said, Slanesh is pretty weak to a lot of the kinds of lists I play, and then my main Slanesh opponent is one of my more casual, less tournament oriented friends. So that could be skewed. Beast of Chaos kind of has a similar story, but of course the sample size is small with only 8 games. And then, it kind of works its way down. So you can see what's positive here. You'll see that I have a better win record in general, and I could just tell you this with order and chaos, and a worse win record with death and destruction for whatever reason. I also play against more of the first two, and then less against the other two. So I guess that those results might be a little skewed. Okay, moving on to the negative performance. Sorry for the graph change here. Um, Slight losses against Nurgle and Iron Jaws. Soulblight is a weird story because Soulblight, the reason why it's not more extreme than this is just because I've played so many games and it's balanced itself out. But like Soulblight tends to be a rough matchup for me in general. Very hard for me to win. I tend to do better against the Castle Eye builds, but anyway. Now the worst is Bone Splitters, but I only played one game against Bone Splitters, so again, you should throw that one out as an outlier. But Zinch is accurate. Out of 13 games, I've only won 2. Now that goes the other way with the meta I'm playing because my buddy Huho, who's I've played I think 9 times, mostly against Zinch, he just kicks my ass a lot of times, and he also ended up going 6-0 at Worlds. So playing Korn, however, but still, he's a great player. And then I have a hard time against Suns. Idneth is largely because I play Hank. And then, yeah, some of these other factions. Okay, so moving on. So in talking about the seasons and eras we've seen over the past 3 years, we had 4 generals handbooks. The first and last being whole year ones, and then the 2 in the middle were kind of split with Galician things. So the first one was monsters, and then I put in brackets here which battle tomes came out around those times. So that was Stormcast and Oryx came out together, all the way to Daughters and Nighthaunt, roughly. Now, anything that was at the end of that book largely probably didn't see a lot of play until the next book, but I'm just trying to give you a sense of the timeline there. Part 1, so Galician Veterans, which was kind of like the battle line that got double damage or whatever against, or no, yeah, well, the Bounty Hunters had double damage against battle line. So Skaven and Sylvaneth kind of kicked it off, and then we kind of ended with Ogres in going from kind of like the Christmas season into the beginning of 23. So then the part 2, so which was basically in 23, the first half of 23, was Galician Champions. So your little foot heroes got good, and that was basically the Slaves book all the way to OBR and Soulblight getting released kind of at the end there. And then we had the Wizard season, which was basically the 3 FOMO boxes of Seraphon, Cities, and Feck, because this past year really slowed down, which was nice for stabilizing the meta. Of course, we had Battle Scroll updates and stuff, which I'm not taking into account here. Now, my personal eras don't necessarily line up with these perfectly, but I kind of worked on armies for different reasons going through the tournament seasons. I always had the tournaments kind of inspiring what I was playing to some extent. So Idoneth, Cities of Sigmar / Stormcast Eternals is pretty much the whole monster season. I started with Idoneth because that was my first army. I wanted to jump into tournaments, and it was the one I had the most painted, so it was a logical choice. Then I really wanted to get into Cities, and I have to say this was when Cities and Stormcast could kind of go together, especially putting Stormcast into Cities, large chunks of it. Like I had a big Fulminators list. I used Dragons a lot, some other cool stuff. This was the second edition or book for Cities, and I loved that book so much. And ever since the new books come out, or ever since I really heard that they were squatting so much stuff, my momentum got deflated. So I got a lot of games in the front, but just haven't really considered myself much of a Cities player since then. Then I had a good Zinch period where it started with Guild of Summoners and then switched to Eternal Conflag, and had actually pretty good success in my Zinch season. I loved the army, but then we got into the Wizard season. So that Zinch season was basically Galician Veterans, so part 1 there. Yeah, and then the save stacking just got a lot worse. And the Guild of Summoners list I was playing, I'll talk about more later. And the Eternal Conflag. Then I moved into kind of Worlds stuff, and the next 2 seasons were basically me trying to be a more competitive player. And the first half of that term, which was basically Galician Champions Part 2, so I guess these do line up pretty well with what's above it. was basically I wanted to play Caradron. I got a game in with them right before they switched to the third edition book because I've always had that army and just never got them on the table. That was fun. And then the third edition book came out, and I loved the melee stuff, which I'll talk about later. And I really tried to push that for Worlds, but I really thought Lumineth was going to be a better addition to our team when I played with Team Serbia. That said, I took like an off meta version of the list because I was trying to be respectful of the endless spells that our Zinch player, who was a great player, and I thought he could use them really well. I just wasn't taking the endless spells that Teclis really wanted to be using. So, but then again, I also had some really good success with Lumineth at the beginning of that term, and we'll talk about that later too. And so after I quit, well, after Worlds was over, I basically stopped playing Lumineth because it was more or less something I was doing for the team. Although I'm excited to give them a shot again in 4th edition. KO was basically my big army for that whole year, basically 2023. And then after kind of like the World season started switching, I was really trying to prove that I could make my way onto the Dutch team this year, and I tried a lot, throwing a lot of stuff against the wall, and not a lot was sticking. KO, I was having a hard. We had a guy in our meta that was just way better. He got like 6-0 last year at Worlds at playing KO, and I was just like, well, that's not going to be the army. So let's see what I can find that could be filling in a good hole. So I tried out Sylvaneth and got my ass absolutely handed to me. I just couldn't get my head wrapped around the army. Granted, it was after the Battle Mage was phased out, so that kind of hurt Sylvaneth a good bit in my estimation. And Gits, I jumped on the Gits train late because I just didn't want to play Squigs when they were at their most quote-unquote broken. It's just not something that attracts me as a more Johnny player. I don't want to just chase the meta. I want to like earn my place in it, and I also want to like be able to be creative in my list building. And I tried a lot of Gits lists that just didn't click. And then I moved on kind of at the end of the season. It almost could be its own little era, was the Warp Lightning Cannons era. I've only literally never played a game of Skaven without the maximum number of Warp Lightning Cannons in the list, and I swear by it. I had the most fun playing that list. We'll talk about it later, but it was a really nice way to end out my 3rd edition. So this is the amount of games I played with my armies, ranked from highest to lowest. So KO got 73 games, if I'm not mistaken. Pretty much was my main army for 2023, as I mentioned. And Cities and Zinch got quite a lot of love. They're kind of all in a group together there, between 60 and 75 or so, all three of those. And then we have another tier that's kind of like Idoneth and Skaven, I guess you could say. That's kind of like a little bit above the lower tier. Idoneth just got a lot of play at the beginning because that's what I was... it was the only army I had that was painted, and I was working up to other things. And then I started expanding how many armies I was playing, and that made a difference too. And then we've got my 4 armies that are almost identical. Lumineth, Gits, Stormcast, and Sylvaneth in terms of number of games played, which is all between 20 and 30. So, there's an argument to be made out of all 9 of these armies that if I'd focused more, I would have, a better feel for things. But that said, or a better record, I should say, at tournaments especially. I definitely think there's some truth to that. There's a part of me that's a Johnny that really likes to mix things up. Plus, I've got even more armies than this. But I really get tired playing one thing, and maybe that's something I could grow into. But at the same time, it gives me... I'm more of a big picture kind of guy. I like to have a sense for how everything works. And I own all the battle tomes because I find that good to know all the rules. Obviously, it's good for our channel too. I just like to diversify and learn more. So trying to keep all these armies at like an even keel with each other is easier said than done, but it's definitely been kind of what's been motivating me. Okay, and then looking at my performance with my armies, again, this is compared to, is that true? Let's see. Yeah, I think this is compared to, yes, the average. Oh, this is just everything with a, this is compared to the average there. That's what it was. Just like I did with the other graph. So compared to my average that I was playing, KO was my best performance. I just got KO better. And you could make an argument there to support the argument I was just talking about, that the army you play with the most, you'll have the most experience with. That said, Cities was my second most played army, and you could see that it's something around 12% worse than my average. That said, Cities was in a weird place for a while, and I was also learning the game a lot at the time. Now, I had a great time playing with them, but they were just, it was a weird battle tome that couldn't keep up, really, and that was another reason I kind of put it on the shelf a good bit before the third edition book came out. Um, anyway, Skaven is my second best performance, which really goes, that kind of points to if you really like an army, I think like you like how it plays and it clicks for you, it really can make a difference. And Skaven, I was always playing Warp Lightning Cannons, yet it's one of my best performing armies. Because I think, at least for a Johnny type player like me that's into list building and creativity, you get a lot of enjoyment out of that, and it goes a long way. Um, on the contrast to that, Sylvaneth, I just never got it. It just never was in my blood. And to be fair, I was basically using other people's lists, although they're really cool lists. I just was not really inventing much on the Sylvaneth front and just got my ass handed to me. And therefore, it's my worst performing army. It's around a 26% win rate, if I'm not mistaken. Which isn't, of course, what we're seeing on screen. Stormcast actually had a little bit, better than average, and Zinch as well. And I also was really passionate about Zinch when I was playing it. Lumineth was a little below, but considering I didn't have all that much experience playing Lumineth when I went in and then played it at Worlds, I think that's actually pretty good. And then, like I said, Cities, Gits, or Ideneth, and Gits all kind of like on the lower end. Gits is a weird one because I actually really like Gits, but for some reason it just didn't end up sitting well, at least at the time that I started it in the meta. Okay, so let's move on. My favorite lists. These are in kind of like a chronological order, or they are. My favorite cities list I ever played was a Settlers Gain list, which I called like Techlian Dragons. At the time, you could take Techless as Coalition, unlimited points, and then take like, I took 4 Stormcast Dragons, and then had just a bunch of city stuff to kind of fill it out. That list was so fun. It was actually the list that I played against Jonas when he beat me 3 times in a row. And when we went to the tournament together and we played the first game against each other. I just love that list. I had such a good time. I even won a nice prize. Shout out to Michael and Rutger at the what was that called? Legions events. For shout out to them for having a most creative list or most interesting list. I really wish every tournament had that because Johnny players like me would win it. It would actually give us a chance to win something. And I got that prize. That was really nice. And plus, I just really had a good time playing it. It's also where I met my buddy David Verbinne. And he's, been a great friend ever since. I wish we still, I'm trying to plan a chance to go visit him. But he gave me at that event the dice that I still to this day use as my command points dice, and I think I will for all time. It's just my tradition now. Okay, then I had 2 Zinch lists. I was playing Guild of Summoners before the second edition book phased out, and it was before anyone was playing it, and I had such a blast. I also met one of my favorite people, Marco from Team Serbia. I met him while playing that list at a team's tournament, and had my all my birds that I was summoning. It was before it went meta, and I just felt like I was doing something interesting and creative. I got absolutely crushed on the Honest Wargamer stream of that Alliance Open Team Championships match against one of the Belgian players playing KO. I usually got something like 53 fate points or something like that per game, and got like 2, 3, 4 birds out. I only got 3 fate points in that game because he tabled me so quick by just shooting all the heroes off. So it was a real bad feel bad. But other than that, I loved playing that army. I played it at 2 different tournaments, and then I followed it up by switching immediately as soon as the book came out, which I can't say about a lot of the books that I've played. Immediately switched into playing the third edition book to play Eternal Conflag, and like tabled people left and right. Had so much fun with 12 flamers. Tried like a faster version of the list, a shorter version of the list. I did notice as the save stacking meta kept getting worse and then in the Magic season being able to deny all the necessary spells I needed to make sure the list worked the way it did. I started feeling like the list just lost juice, but when I was playing it, I had such a good time. Then moving on to another book that as soon as it came out, I fell in love with was the new KO book, especially for the Assault Boat melee list. 2 frigates, I think it was like 2x6 Sky Wardens and 2x3 Engine Riggers plus like 5 heroes or something before all the prices went up. Granted, I probably had more I don't know, tournament savvy with the 15 Thunderers list later on, but I didn't enjoy playing it as much. I really liked the risk reward and just of the sending everything in, striking first, kicking ass, taking names with the assault boat list, and ended up hanging it up because it just was having a harder time once people figured it out. But I loved catching people off guard when they had no idea that KO could be a melee list, and it was so fun. And then obviously, I have a lot of passion for Warp Lightning Cannons. Um, I've played 4 tournaments with it now. One was a doubles tournament that we did well at. Um, Actually, I did well at all 4 tournaments I played with the list. Like, in my estimation of what good looks like, especially for a list that's a meme list, my goal was always to make 4 Warp Lightning Cannons assumed and then build a list that makes it work as well as possible. And look, I went 3-2 at World Singles. I went 3-2 at Smash to Rubble in Serbia. Nick and I on doubles placed third place at an event, and then I took fourth place at a local event here in Amsterdam. But had it been the point system that we use at Alliance Open, I would have gotten third place, and had it been the Bloodstorm point system, I would have gotten second place. So it's kind of insane how well that list has done. And it was something I had a blast playing. So there we go. There's my top 5 lists that I played. All right, tournaments. So like I said, I played 41 tournaments. In total, that's 155 games. That's 29 singles games, 7 teams, and 5 doubles. One of those teams was a single dayer, but the rest were 2 or 3 dayers because of Worlds is a 3-dayer. And I should have said, yeah, so this is a typo then. So 25 1-dayers, that's true. 16 2-dayers. And then I said one of them was 4 games and one was 6 games. So the 6-game one was actually a 3-dayer because it was Worlds in 23, because we split it into 2 games per day for 3 days. So that's the breakdown. A lot of people don't take 1-dayers seriously, but sometimes in this, at least in this meta, it's hard to commit to going to 2 dayers, or because they're further away, or they're just not happening, or maybe it's not as English friendly. The Netherlands and Belgium are or northern Belgium, I should say, Flanders are really English. Like, it's really easy to go and just speak English, but I speak Dutch when I go. But even for those that don't, you can just go and get away with it. Going to France, or I haven't tried the other countries, Luxembourg. Sometimes Germany can be a little harder, but Germany's still pretty good. I haven't been to Scandinavia yet playing, but I imagine that like the Netherlands and Belgium, it's actually quite English friendly. But you can see the country breakdown below. 27 of the games are in my local country, the Netherlands. Or sorry, 27 tournaments. That's 107 games. 10 tournaments in Belgium. I love going to Belgium for tournaments. I love the people there. It's all of them were in Flanders. I haven't tried Wallonia yet, the French-speaking half, but I'm open to that too, as long as I know there's not going to be a language barrier. Sometimes if you go to too small of a tournament, you might have some trouble. Like the tournament I went to in Luxembourg was lovely, but that was the tournament I had the most language barriers ever at. Let's see, 2 in Germany. That was for Osnabrück teams twice, and that was 10 games in total. One time in Serbia for Smash to Rubble. That was 5 games. But then I went to train with the team last year, which felt like a tournament because I played 7 games in 3.5 days. That might as well have been a tournament. So in a sense, I played 2 tournaments in Serbia and for 12 games. And then Luxembourg the one time for 3 games. Unfortunately, Nick and I were also the most plastered we've ever been together, because it was during curfew and during COVID, and Luxembourg had different rules for going out. So we went to a cocktail bar and famously had something like 6 old fashions in like the span of 2 hours. I blame Nick, but I could have been also better at saying no. So anyway, I was throwing up that whole evening, and even between my first and second rounds the next day. So Luxembourg might not have been my most fun time, but I am glad I got to go, and everyone there was super nice. Okay, so my armies that I played at these, I basically already talked about this, but KO, I played the most at 9 tournaments, 35 games, then Cities at 7, Zinch and Ideneth at 5 each, Skaven at 4, Lumineth, Sylvaneth, and Stormcast at 3 each, and Gitz at 2. And obviously some tournaments have are 3 dares, are 3 game tournaments, some are 5, and some are even 6, We had one that was 4 because of COVID curfew. Okay, my best performance, not in any particular order here, I guess, but Osnabrück teams, when I was preparing for Worlds with Serbia, I took Lumineth after only having played 2 games of Lumineth ever and went 4-1. Granted, at a teams event, you can get positively paired into good matchups, but that said, I was very proud of my performance. It's the best 2-dayer performance I've ever done. And I think in terms of individual rankings, I want to say there were something like 200 people there, and I placed 23rd out of 200, so I felt pretty good. And then Nick and I have played doubles 5 times, but 3 of those 5 times, the last 3 times, we podiumed. Um, we got one time he was playing Feck and I was playing KO, and he got, I think that's right. Yeah, we got first place at that one. No, that was Gitz and KO. And then I want to say the next one was either Feck and OBR. No, it was OBR and KO, and we got second place at that one and went 3-0. And then the third time we played Skaven and I played Skaven, he played Feck, and we went third place and went 2-0-1. We tied our last game. So anyway, that was pretty fun. Doubles is, less serious. It's more casual, but Nick and I have a blast doing it. And we also perform well. Largely because the turning point was when we said, let's just take something that's not fun for anyone, which is kind of like shitty, but also kind of funny. And to be fair, the time we won like first place, we ended up having some karma getting paid back to us because our final round was a mirror match, KO and Gitz, which we deserved. Okay. Smash a Rubble in Serbia was recently. It was back in April. And I was playing the Skaven list, went 3-2, and there were 26 people after dropouts and whatever, and I ended up placing 8th. And there was definitely some room for doing even better at that one, but I had a blast at the tournament, but I'll talk about that in a minute too. But it was just great proving that Warp Lightning Cannons, I feel like when you go into a tournament, if you're playing a meme list like that and you still pull out a positive win rate, it's saying something clicking with how that army works and how you play. So World's Singles with Skaven just recently. It's my last tournament. That's this year. Because I didn't play singles in 23. I wasn't on teams this year. So it was also with the Warp Lightning Cannons list. I had a lot of pressure on me after an amazing first day of going 3-0. I had so many people sending me nice messages saying, oh my God, Ryan, what's going on? How are you doing this? With Warp Lightning Cannons, you have to have a little bit of luck, and my luck ran out in game 4. I was playing against my favorite opponent, new friend and everything. I just had a lovely game against this French guy named Sylvain. I don't speak French, so I'm probably butchering that. It's one or the other, I think. But lovely guy. We were about the same age. Jazz musician, super cool dude. We had a really friendly game. He was playing ogres with like 5 cows and the blood vultures and the whole thing. 2 blood pelt hunters. But we had a turn where it wasn't even reliant on the cannons. I know everyone thinks the cannons are the reason it falls apart, but I sent in Screech buffed up, and I sent in 10 Plague Sensor Bears buffed up, and I was like 1 or 2 wounds away from killing each one of 3 out of his 4 remaining cows, and literally above average, I should have killed all 3 of those targets, and it had nothing to do with the lightning cannons, and then I would have won that game. But I just whiffed. I just whiffed real hard on the stuff that doesn't usually whiff, and it's just how it goes. Sometimes you play a game, and that would have put me at 4-1, and let's say I would have lost that last game, but I would have been so happy with a 4-1. My opponent from that game went 14 out of 156 players. I ended up only going 64, but still. And then my last game was against an impossible. Also a lovely game. It was against a KO player that he just stayed away from me the whole time. So had it been so many other options, I think I would have had a much better time in terms of win-loss. But still, 3-2 at World Singles with a meme list, cannot complain. I was over the moon. Just fantastic. Okay, and then some shout-outs for tournaments in general. I've kind of got these in more or less chronological order. All right, so And this, if you're not on this list, it doesn't mean I didn't have a good time at the tournament, but I just wanted to make a list of 5 basic things. First off, I love playing in Belgium. So shout out to literally every time I've played in Belgium. I just always have a great time in Flanders. Thank you to everyone out there who organizes that stuff. Ruff, Michael, Rutger, the Green Knight people. I might be missing someone. But God, I just love playing in Belgium. But if I have to pick one place, it's the Green Knight events in Bruges. Those guys, it was my second tournament ever. Actually, my first 2 tournaments were in Belgium, in Antwerp and then in Bruges. Those guys have been nothing but just amazingly sweetheart people to me. They've just been so friendly. They embraced me as one of their own. Every time I came in, they were happy to see me, hugs all around. I tend to perform decently at those tournaments. The vibe is great. I love the beer. I just love going. I've like even when I've had a bad win record at in Bruges, I still had an amazing time. I also love that movie, by the way, in Bruges. Beautiful city, amazing time. The teams tournament, Nick, Henry, Jonas, and I were supposed to play, but then Tom filled in for Jonas when he got sick. Was amazing. Like we took second place, but more importantly, we had an amazing time. The 4 of us getting drunk the night before and still performing well. Like I just can't say enough about Bruges and Belgium in general. But thank you to those guys. Alliance Open. Tom is one of my like good buds here in the Dutch scene. He's also, if you don't know, the head ref and organizer for Worlds and a number of GW events, including the World Championship. He cannot put on a bad event. I mean, like he's just built for doing good events. And obviously, the new channel that they've got going on, Threshold, is already making waves, and I've been invited to come be a part of that team too. And so I'm really looking forward to that. But the Alliance Open team just makes really great events, and especially Worlds. Last year's Worlds teams was one of my favorite events I've ever been to. One of my favorite games I've ever played was against Freddie Leggett. I lost, but he was playing his cities list. I just had a fucking blast playing that game, and the rest of the tournament was amazing. Just great vibes. And then this year at singles, same story. I didn't play a single opponent that I didn't enjoy the game, and got to have a blast. So like it says something when you can not only make you can make not only local tournaments amazing, but make these international tournaments where everyone's like kind of cutthroat and competitive, make them really strong. And then White Scars doubles. Obviously, I've said some really positive things about doubles. The Pack Tactics ones are great too. The ones in Mechelen are great as well. But if I had to pick one, the White Scars doubles hosted are TO'd by Tice and Neil. They do such a great job making a fun atmosphere there. The food's great. We have a great time playing. The game we ended in our last tournament, Nick and I playing against Dawa and his girlfriend or partner, Mary Lou, was amazing. One of the most fun games I've ever played. Just great time playing doubles, and we tend to have a good record there too. Smash to Rubble, I've already mentioned, hosted and TO'd by my buddy Marco and the amazing blueberry juice that was there. It was actually really healthy, really nice. I love going to Serbia and seeing those guys. And God, the event, I not only did I perform well, but like the karaoke with the guys, the event was well run. Everyone was super friendly. It was such a nice environment that I made friends with the Slovenians real hard. Like it's like Balkans. It's real hard not to become friends with them immediately. And I'm trying to get Nick and I to go to a tournament in Slovenia this coming March, I think, in a castle. Shout out to Nino. Holy shit, like just positive vibes. One of the most positive vibe tournaments I've ever been to. And I definitely encourage people to check that one out. I know that part of the AoS community is not as well known or advertised, but I think people should definitely give it a shot if they can make it over there. And then I just want to shout out to all the local TOs. There's a long list. I already mentioned Tice and Neil. Pater with Bloodstorm. Tom I already mentioned. Joop in Haarlem. I'm going to be forgetting people. Domenico put on a great event here in Amsterdam for his first event. I'm probably blanking on someone really important right now, but there have been so many great tournaments in the Netherlands, and I've had such a great time just being here, and feel like it's a really healthy meta. So, and just a fun, great place to play. So anyone that can make it to the Netherlands for games, I don't think Worlds will be here next year, but it's a great place. And I'm biased, but I also think it really is a great environment. And that's it, guys. Sorry for the self-indulgence here and just focusing on what my third editions looked like. But I haven't done a tournament reports in a while, so I thought I'd wrap that up. I thought it'd be interesting for you guys to see the stats of how someone like me performs in these metas and how I've approached the evolution of third edition and myself. But anyway, this is like my shout out conclusion and video to third edition. Thank you so much for joining along for the ride. Fourth edition stuff soon to come out, and we're going to be hitting it real hard. Feel free to like, share, subscribe, hit us up in the Discord. Thanks for all the love, and until next time, Ryan out.